Welcome to the Sober Life Rocks podcast. I'm your host, Margy Schaller, and I want to welcome you today and let you know that you're not alone. How many of you have been in those situations where the alcohol-forward events at conferences or business parties have made you feel isolated? I know I have, but through this podcast, we're changing that narrative. We are here to create a community where individuals like you who choose not to drink or drink less can find camaraderie, support, and practical advice. So let's get the conversation started. It is my absolute privilege and honor to introduce you to Gary Kadi. Gary is the founder of Next Level Practice with a mission to have dentists and their teams be time-free, debt-free, and frustration-free. And his life's mission is to leave dentistry better than he found it while enhancing the quality of life for all. Gary, welcome.
Thank you, Margy. What a privilege and a pleasure. It's such a great honor to be a part of such a great group who is expanding the thinking in our industry. And I think, for sure going to be able to change lives and save lives, because I was one of those guys at trade shows that you were just talking about with nowhere to go. It just like my heart sank, and I remember that feeling. So thank you for being a stand for the possibility of bringing balance to our industry.
Absolutely. So some people may have heard your story, but many probably have not. And I would love to take you back even so far as childhood, the sort of family that you grew up in as it regards, alcohol use and what you saw growing up.
Well, this is going to be a good one, Margy, because you're diving into the deep end. No big deal. Just jump right in. All right, Gary, we want you to take the kimono back and we want you to tell us about your childhood. And let's talk about the trauma right off the bat. Grew up in central New Jersey. It's called 579 3rd Avenue, affectionately. But it's a place where I never wanted to go back to. And I really do appreciate the question because this isolation started back when I was 6 years old. And, I thought, fear and physical and mental abuse was normal because that's all I knew, right? Home full of fear, watch out for this, be careful of that. And I know, where it came from a root of love, but I listened to it as, oh my gosh, Margy, it's like, I feel like I was walking on eggshells in the world, right? And then, you know, I, it, my dad, he did the best he could. He told me this later, he did what his dad did, which was scream, yell, physically hit. I used to get the belt, and I felt like I was a bad kid. And, so that was happening on the outside. And on the inside, I was basically just feeling like I'm a unworthy person, and I had no guidance growing up. So, and that was a big deal. I can speak about this freely. I couldn't do it early. I was ashamed. I was living in shame and guilt and like, what did I do wrong? And, I was living in a very tumultuous world. So at a very young age, I saw a way out, and the way out was through my grandfather and my uncle. My grandfather, Nick Abruzzi, he's like, this, 5 feet 5, fire plug, thick,
Bigger than life. Yeah.
yeah, he's bigger than life. And he was an entrepreneur. So he had a small business. And he and my uncle had a small business. And I learned, I went there and I got acknowledged. I worked hard. I got acknowledged for working hard. I got acknowledged by getting paid. So I had this like attraction where I started working when I think it was like 8 years old. So since I was 8, and most people would look at that as externally like, wow, this kid's like motivated. No, yeah, I was motivated not to work, but to get out of the situation I was in. And I found that's how I built my life. And fast forward, went through life, people pleasing. I wanted you to like me. I was like, you know, I was a workaholic at a very young age because it kept the attention off of the pain that I was feeling. Does that make sense?
And it was an escape.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And
I've heard of.
we'll always find, what I've learned, and I do a lot of study in this area now because I know how powerful it can be and as an impact in a dental practice. That's why I did it for years. I did it first for myself to develop all these methodologies that we might get to today. about healing trauma, and then really learning how to communicate, not from a place of like manipulation because I wanted you to like me. Like my whole life, I realized I was living with a mask on and armor on. I basically suited up armor, threw on a mask of what I thought my identity should be, and I wanted you to like me and respect me and think that I was a good guy. And spent my whole life doing that. And that's part of the root cause of addictions, because you can't outrun that feeling. And no matter what coping mechanism, and I had workaholism, I had alcoholism at a very young age, but I also had autism that changed my life.
Mhm.
And not me personally, my son had autism. And my wife came to me. It was so funny. I'll tell you a quick story. How am I doing on time? I'm just
You're
as
doing
an,
great. You're doing great.
okay, great. Um, I'll never forget it. Like, so here we are, we had a year, and it was one of those years in business. Like, it wasn't our best year. You have amazing years and good years and great years. And then, you're either learning or you're earning. And one year was kind of flat. And I came down to the Christmas party and I got everybody rides home. And the reason why I got them all rides home, because I knew I needed a ride home. And so I got a martini when I got there. I got, a bottle of my own, Rombauer Chardonnay, and I drank, and I was supposed to give this inspirational message to my team. And I go, you guys suck. This was horrible. You're crazy. We're not doing this ever again. I was pounding my fist on the table. And it was my cry for love.
Yeah.
It was, there's either love or a call for love. And often we misinterpret when people are calling out for, I need help, I need love. Because especially men in dentistry, my experience, women a little bit better at it from my experience. Raising your hand and saying, I need help is like one of the last things, especially a street kid from New Jersey was ever taught. I was taught, figure it out, work harder, work smarter, be better, do more. And, you could imagine that is exhausting. There's a lot of men and women walking around in dentistry that they're exhausted, not just because they have to be great dentists clinically, then they got to run a business, then they got to run a life. And the stressors of dentistry, in my opinion, Margie, and I'd like to get your opinion on this. I think the men and women that deliver dentistry are so overburdened and unqualified to do some of the things. They're like, they didn't sign up for half the things they have to do, and they have to maintain a home life. The pressures of that are so great. That's why, like, back in the day, it was like suicide was the number one category of suicide was dentists,
Yeah. Well, I want
we,
to unpack a couple of the things that you've touched on because you
yeah,
just
please. I'm talking a lot. I'm sorry.
no,
You got me jacked up here today.
you just dropped so much gold along this pathway. So one of the things that I heard you say was about this mask. And I'm going to say this is not an exclusive male thing because I lived my entire life with a mask. And I
Mm,
lived my life with a mask because I grew up in an alcoholic household. And so I didn't know what normal was.
yeah.
And I remember going to friends' houses and watching how the mothers and daughters interacted.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay, so that's how it looks like to be a little girl. So I would put that mask on. Later in life, I did all the things. I loved theater. I loved cheerleading because why? I got to like officially put on the uniforms and I got
Right.
to see the things. But
Mm,
really, as I came into my adulthood and into the workforce, I didn't also know how to be the good employee or eventually I owned my own business. I put on those masks and the whole time there's this underlying terror
yep.
that somebody's going to see me and it's going to
Yep.
be lacking because I was always told that I was lacking.
Yep. Yep.
Now, I'm going to say something that I think might be a little controversial, but I believe that my drinking started out as a mask as well.
There's no doubt. Oh,
It started, that
that's
started out,
exactly what it is.
I want to be like them. They're
Mhm.
having fun. I don't know what fun looks like or even feels like.
Yep.
At least I behave like they behave, then
Yep.
I might fit in.
Yeah. Of course. Look, it's masking the fear of being social, or the fear of, like, for me, like being with yourself, being with myself. I did not like myself. And, I call alcoholism, and I'm going to be 16 years sober next week, which is a miracle. I
Congratulations.
couldn't make it 16 freaking seconds. And if I could swear, I would have sworn right there. I could make it 16 effing seconds without thinking about a drink, hungover, or thinking about drinking, hungover, or drinking, and I'm already, drunk. And
Yeah.
it was just this spiral that I couldn't get out of. I just couldn't get out of it until my wife came to me. She goes, "Look, my nickname is Party Fresh, by the way. You want to have some fun? Throw down some drinks with me." I'm like, and I didn't realize it, but it was the sugar that was in the alcohol, Margie, that really got to me. Because when I quit, the bigger addiction was the sugar addiction to break. And I
Hmm.
broke that, And there's one more when you retire. So like I've helped many men and women retire. It's like the ego identity is lurking underneath the pain of why I was drinking. So I was drinking to mask, just to pick up on what you said. I was drinking to self-medicate and mask the internal pain that I was experiencing, right? And I was experiencing pain from two fears: fear of not getting what I want, or fear of losing what I had.
Hmm.
So I was in a chronic state of my sympathetic nervous system. I never got to parasympathetic. My body was working overtime, and it was wearing my body down in a big way. It wasn't just the alcohol, but it was like, you think you're sleeping better. No, I tried to drink so I didn't have to think, so that I could pass out, that I could sleep. But now I track my sleep, and now I get like almost 3 hours of REM sleep a night. I mean, that I couldn't even get to that because I was in survival of like getting through the day, then getting through the night, then trying to get through this hangover that I had the next day. And it was just, and I swore to myself, I said, I would never, today is the day. I am not going to pick up a drink. And at 5:01, I always had this rule: 5:01. I couldn't drink before 5 o'clock because then I'd be an alcoholic. And I was defending against anybody, let alone me calling myself an alcoholic. So, I mean, I
Yep.
try to do everything I can to hide the damn thing. And, we're only as sick as our secrets, I learned. If I have secrets, my brain is sick as those secrets. It's the degree of which. So that's why people come straight with things, because then they're one with themselves. And that's the definition of integrity I've learned. Integrity is wholeness. It doesn't mean good, bad, right, wrong. It means it's whole and complete. And if I know I'm doing something against my word, I'm breaking my integrity with myself. And that's the root cause of the perpetuation of it, because it just keeps building and building, and nobody ever gives you a way out, and there is a way out.
Yep, absolutely. Okay. So the second thing I wanted to pick up on that you had said before was this business of um, kind of being the life of the party is what I heard you talk about.
Nah,
And
nah.
and we, at least I, had this identity of being the life of the party,
Yes.
and I would get other people to drink more because it then justified how much I wanted to drink.
Oh yeah.
And so it would be like, "Oh, come on, let's do shots," or "Oh, come on, let's do this." Most of the people that were with me never drink that way,
Right.
but I would goad them into it in order
Yeah,
to justify the way I wanted to drink.
exactly. Well, you're a leader. You're a leader there, and now you get to be a leader here.
Right.
Congratulations, leader.
Totally.
You're a leader for goodness now.
But it's interesting to me now on this side of the equation and thinking about the events that I go to where people are just socially drinking, and that's a little bit more comfortable versus
Right.
the events where the pressure comes to bear, and I'm like,
Yep.
oof, I know that trick.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know that trick.
Yeah.
But then the other piece of it is this emotional masking. So the first mask is like, I want to be like you, so I'm going to act like you. The
Okay.
second mask of alcoholism, I believe, is masking those painful feelings inside.
Oh
And
yeah.
you said, like, do I agree that dentists in particular struggle because the amount of pressures that they've allowed to pile up exceed the ability to cope?
Yep.
Yes, and I think it's everywhere. I don't think it's limited to dentists,
Uh,
but I do
I
think
live
that
in a bubble here in dentistry. I'm like a little,
I do think
like
specifically.
my whole world is dentistry. So it's like it's sort of like when you're drinking, your whole world is trying to look for the evidence of you can drink this much, like you were saying. What I'm saying is I live in a, relatively myopic industry where I don't look outside of it, and I'm obsessed with it, and I'm obsessed with making it better than I found it, like you said earlier. And yeah,
But I
I
think
agree. It is
entrepreneurs in
everywhere.
general, entrepreneurs have something that they're great at. something that they have a passion for, something that they want to do more of, something they want to bring to the world.
Right.
And get this idea that if they run their own business doing this thing, then they'll
Yep.
get to be their own boss. Now,
Yep.
I'm a serial entrepreneur. What I know is that I'm never my own boss. I just now have 100 clients who are all my bosses.
Yeah, there you go. Very
But
nice.
and we add on team members, and so all the things. But I do think that the pressures are things that we're not taught in life, not in
No.
our family of origins typically, certainly not in school, certainly not by society. We're not taught how to cope with those. And so we end up in this place that we seem to be today across the board, where just the depression and the anxiety and the like desire to just flee in any way possible, and that flees often into alcoholism, but often it's drug addiction. And quite frankly, we're going to go to a topic that I know you care a lot about, which is that we've seen this uptick in suicide, and
Yep.
it's devastating. But I want to give you this moment to sort of talk about what you have seen and what are some of the things that I might see and what I can do for that person that I see.
Yeah, I think, if whether we're talking about suicide or we're talking about alcoholism, one of the things, or we're talking about parenting, because my wife taught me this, because no one ever really taught me how to parent. And so I watched my wife do it, and she did a beautiful job. And what she does is a few things. She's always in in this space of safe space. So like I can be a reactionary person. Like if my son comes to me and says I had unprotected sex or something, or I drank, or I'd be like, what? Like we talked about, like that reaction, the game's over. The way my wife came to me, and this is key. This is key for the enabler side, because there's two sides to drug addiction and alcoholism. Is there's the perpetrator, the person that's, and it's now is using the Cartman drama triangle, which is persecutor, victim, and rescuer. So it's persecutor, victim, rescuer, and everyone is fitting into those one of three things. It's called the Cartman triangle. It's really powerful. We use it actually in our organizations, because you can see where people go. This person caused the upset, this group of people rescue, and this group of people become victim to the change that's happening. And it's really profound in that when you just create a safe space and take responsibility. So it looks like this. My wife came to me after I had that devastating delivery to my team. The next morning, she's standing over me with her arms crossed. I'm hungover. My eye doesn't want to creep up. We were living in Arizona at the time. And she said, look, I'm never going to do that again. My nickname is Party Fresh. She said, Party Fresh, guess what? Good morning. She kept it light. And she goes, look, I just want you to know, I'm never going to do that again. If you want to continue to drink like that, that's all on you. Rome is my son's name. Rome and I are going to be moving to New York. And if you want to come with us, you're welcome to come, but you're not going to be drinking. So it's like either you work that out for yourself, and she put 100% of the responsibility on me. She also painted a picture of what she's doing, and the train's leaving the building. So, most alcoholics, by the way, or anybody that's like contemplating suicide, they know the gig's up. It's a call for love, right? It's either you're getting love or a call for love. So like paying attention to that. But the key is, imagine what it was like. She was taking care of me as a sick father, and my son who was sick with autism at the time, right? Could you imagine how much pressure that was? And she, of course, wants to be married to me. She has this intention for us to be together. And she boldly made a stand. She said, I'm drawing a line in the sand. This is what we do with our dentists, by the way. The reason why they can't get implementation is because they don't say, team, love you, appreciate, here's what got us here. I'm taking a new level of responsibility for the practice as a leader of this practice. What got us here isn't going to get us over there. I'm asking you to join me. So you invite the team. Now they're choosing with their own volition to move forward, just like my wife did with me, because there's a lot of people that are trying to get their spouse help, and they're going, you need to stop drinking. That is the worst thing that you could do. They already know that they're a problem. What you can do is say, I'm choosing to move forward in this manner. You're welcome to join me, but now this is the my first sponsor said this to me. He said, Gary, if you want to get sober, anything I say to you is gonna be right. If you don't want to get sober, anything I say to you is going to be wrong. He said, here's the quote. He convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. I'll say that one more time, just so people, it's like when you hear it first, he convinced against his will. So, like my wife's telling me to get sober and I don't have that will, then I'm not going to take the action and it's not going to work anyway. This is the same thing is true with getting your team on board. If you don't get to the inside and they don't choose to come with you, you can't get implementation. My my wife said, you don't have to stay here, but we're going here. If you want to come, this is what the conditions are. And she detached from the outcome, whether I was going to do it or not. And she was going forward. And that's what true leaders do. They make a stand for something and that they believe in. And they're not trying to people please and trying to hold on to the relationship because all you're doing is perpetuating that situation.
Yep. And I think that really that's one of the things that we at Sober Life Rocks are trying to do is to not say we're here to change anybody's behavior.
Right.
We're not here to change anybody's behavior. We
Yep.
simply want to expand the conversation and include people who don't choose to drink or drink excessively at these various different events.
I
But
really need to highlight that. That like we can't step over your what you're standing for here. You're not telling anybody to do anything. You're not telling anybody that they're broken. You're not telling anybody you should get sober. What you're saying is we believe that the health of our industry is directly proportionate to have accessibility to people that operate differently. I'm going to tell you, as somebody who's been in the industry for 30 years and have gone to thousands of events, I have never had a place where I can go do healthy things. It always centered around a dance floor. And believe me, my favorite dance floor, I have two favorite dance floors. I'm not, one is in Destin when we had an event down there, and the other dance floor was in Chicago at the Navy Pier when that place used to go off. It was a gala event, and it was amazing. Those are my two favorite dance floors, Margie. So I frequented them. But if I had an alternative, I things would have been dramatically different for sure. And when you spend 40, 50 days on the road at events like that, that's a lot of exposure
yeah. And I
with no.
imagine too, because I kept my sobriety silent for 19 years in this industry,
Uh,
I imagine that there are a number of people out there who are in the similar situation where they're concerned if they talk about the fact that they don't drink, that
yep.
they're going to be judged, and therefore going to these events feels even more uncomfortable.
Oh yeah.
But what if there was alternative adult beverages? What
Yep.
if there were people who, saw the little Sober Life Rocks member pin on your lapel and walked over and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited to talk to you. Like, let me introduce myself and let's just have a great time tonight. And your guard goes down, your parasympathetic nervous system is able to sort of kick in
Yep.
and then enjoy that dance floor.
Exactly.
It's a
You know,
whole
it,
different experience. But going back to taking us back down this road, because I know it's something that you want to talk about, is the suicide prevention aspect of it. Gary, what I really want to know from you is this. If there are employees of a boss who they see just really beginning to exhibit certain signs, or if there is a boss themselves and they know, like, I'm a one straw away from the camel's back breaking,
yep.
what are some of the conversations that people can have, just like you talked about with your wife, but in this instance, what are some of the conversations people can have and with who to begin to hold out a hand
Yep.
or point them in the right direction? Like, what do we do?
Yeah. If there's like if you're in a place of like brand new, there's many different scenarios, right? Like, but if you're working with someone else, I always like allowing people to know that they're seen. So when my wife just really just saw me and reflected something up for me in a very non-threatening manner. It was just really like, there's different approaches depending on the intimacy that you have with an individual and how straight you can go, right? Sometimes we've done, and because we do a lot of this, people know I share on stage that I'm sober, and I deal with we know how to deal with, like, addictions and alcohols inside of an organization, because we believe, like, whether it's at home or at the office, it's all a universal thing, right? So the first place that we would go normally is to say, I just want to check in with you, a very light touch. So you do this on a gradient process, and just want to say, look, I really notice, I just noticed, you're just not, your traditional self, where you're like, you just have a different energy. I just want to check in with you.
I
You know,
love the word choice you just said, that you're not your traditional self, versus what I thought you were going to say was your normal self.
yeah,
And normal self for me back in the day was a sick person.
exactly. Yeah, you don't,
That's brilliant.
I'm actually speaking to the soul of a person, because, if you believe in mind, body, and soul, mind gets in the way of, like, the soul and the body. The mind starts taking over and tells stories. So I don't want to speak to the mind or react to the mind. I want to speak to, there's a soul in there that, my favorite analogy around this conversation is Michelangelo didn't sculpt the David. He took away a part of the marble that wasn't the David. You see, we put those masks on, that armor on, and if you speak to that, you're just speaking up in here. But if you can cut to and say, I really just wanted to let you know that I noticed it looked like there's something happening, and I want you to know I'm a very safe space for you to share with me if you would like to share anything that you'd like to say. I'm safe, because I just want to let you know I see you and I'm here. Love is, the definition of love is, I see you, I value you, right? And I accept you. So acceptance is zero judgment on what's going on. But if I come from the place of love, like I'm coming from a place of love, you can actually feel that vibration, because I'm speaking down from my heart, not my head. When I'm trying to manipulate something, this is why we don't do scripting. We teach people how to come from their heart out of their mouth, and the patient knows, or the person who we're talking to knows, or the team member or the doctor. You can feel the vibration. It's slower. The cadence is different than when you're trying to manipulate thoughts. And so we just come from that and just give them a space. And sometimes you got to read the tea leaves there. You might just end the conversation and say, look, I'm here and available to you. I just want you to know you can reach out to me if you ever want to talk, right? So sometimes it takes a second time, because once somebody knows the gig's up,
Yeah.
and then they see it's safe again, they'll come back around. So you kind of like do it in the gradient spot. So I would recommend that.
Yeah. Awesome. Last thing I want to ask you is, since you got sober, what has your life been? What has your strategy been when you go to all of these zillions of conferences we both go to?
Yeah.
When you go to those events, like how do you function and network in a meaningful way
Yeah.
without the drink?
Yeah, well, it's not fair to ask me that at this point, because, like, well, maybe it is. I mean, I'm 16 years sober. So now I used to have all these considerations when I first stopped. It's like, what are they going to think if I'm not drinking? What should I drink? Right. I had so many, and again, it's called my unevictable inner roommate, that I call it, Margy. It's the unevictable inner roommate. That's like, when I first started getting sober, was screaming loud all these things, like, oh, what if they find out? They're not going to be a part of me. I'm not going to be a part of them. They're not going to like my company. They're not going to do this. Like, I want to have fun. They want to have, like, all these, but that's just made up over here. Here's what I noted. People actually, when I say, yeah, I order a sparkling water with lime, and I walk right up to bar, sparkling water. They go, what do you want? You want a beer? I go, nah, sparkling water with lime. They go, you don't drink? I go, no, I'm 16 years sober. And it's the best thing I ever did, because I learned principles on how to live life in a different way. And everything I was trying to get with alcohol, I now get by doing from inside work. And then all of a sudden, I can't tell you how many people have become a part of, like, there's an AA group that I started. There's, I mean, it's just endless suicide, suicide prevention as well, like we talked about. So yeah, I started being of service to people. That was the thing, and that's how I stay sober. I help as many people as I can help, whether it's with addictions, with business, dentistry, my son, whatever it is. It's like turned my life over to being of service to people, and it changed everything because it wasn't about me anymore. It was to be about how I can help people. And by the way, that's how you get more of what you want effortlessly, by giving out to the world.
I love that. And I love the boldness with which you now say it in these settings. I'm curious, has anybody ever given you the what? Come on, loosen up. Have you ever gotten comments of that nature?
No, no. I think it's because of my behavior around it. I'm just very, very grounded and okay with it. Not one person. Really, and I've let thousands of people know personally or on stage. They actually say they know somebody who has a situation. They were glad that I was like straight with it and bold with it, and that I didn't have this stigma attached to it, and I was able to freely share about it. And that's every person that's come up with to me has told me, like, or can you help this person? Can you, like, it's always something. Or if they're neutral, they don't say like, you dumbass, like, why are you talking about that? Like, I never got that. It was between my ears that was creating that.
And you know what I love? Because I have had people, sometimes they'll say, I'll just stick with the club soda and lime. And I'll have people say, oh, loosen up or come on and just enjoy one. But what I heard you say was you don't stop at that sentence.
Mm-mm.
You keep going with and I've been sober for X number of years and it's the best thing that ever happened to me.
Yep,
I think that is such a strong, powerful ownership of who you are, of what you've done, that nobody at that point is going to say, oh, come on, lighten up, have a drink. I
yep,
never did that until recently. And so I would say that this is a formula that other people can follow, whether or not they're sober for 16 years. It could be, I've made a lifetime decision that I don't drink for my own health.
exactly,
I've made the decision not to drink at all this year.
exactly.
And I'm really enjoying it. I'm feeling so much better and more confident. Like, I just love the idea of claiming it and then naming the results of this claim.
Yeah, no, that's really a great point. I didn't even realize that I do that. It's amazing. And you mentioned something I want to pick up on, which is the vulnerability of things, right? At first you're vulnerable because you're trying to protect something. Like you're protecting, like the mask is now ripped off. And, let's go back to the original part of our discussion. The mask and the armor's off. So, it's like the lobster story. Lobsters go down. The way they grow is they pop their shell off. They're vulnerable. They go under a rock till they can grow it back, and it's bigger. And then they grow into the tail. I guess that's there is a story about it. I didn't tell it very well, but the concept of the lobster molting its tail, going down vulnerable. And that's what happens. Your first year or so, you feel vulnerable, you feel raw because you're getting straight, but it's that transformation that is invaluable, because when you can live a life, here's where peace is for me. My whatever goes on inside me is what you get out here. And that is called transparency. They have them in kitchens. That's another example. Like they all of a sudden you can see people cutting things up because it was so like, the industry was horrible. So they said, here, we're going to prove it to you. And that's where the congruency happens. And when you get a level of congruency, what was happening for me was I was in such pain because I had such a break between who I thought I was and how I was living out here, that I needed a pain med to like calm the this all day happening. And then if somebody had my identity cracked, or I would be like losing my mind. And so when you don't have to live like that, and you don't, by the way, vulnerability I found goes away if there's nothing to protect. You don't need it. All you do have is transparency. And there is no need for going under a rock, because you're perfect as you are and you're perfect as you're not. You're designed the perfect way. But many of us don't have those self-talk conversations. It's like, you piece of crap, you don't belong, you're not enough, do more, have more, be more. And it's like this endless thing. And I've been able to shut that off in my head. I'm actually writing a book about it right now, about how to shut the inner roommate off so you can actually go out and live a life that you choose, not these voices in your head.
That's so funny. You call it the inner roommate. I call it the boo voice.
Ah,
We'll have
that's
those.
funny. That's
Gary,
fun.
I just cannot thank you enough. I am just overwhelmed with all of the things, but just want to kind of summarize. We talked about this pain that we carry, whether it's through childhood trauma or whether it's just through the pain of being afraid that we're going to fail,
Mhm.
that creates this mask.
Mhm.
And oftentimes we turn to an ism. Could be
Mhm.
alcoholism, could be workaholism, it could be all kinds, shopping, like all the things
Autism.
that then we think is going to cover the pain. But so often, for me anyhow, it caused more problems and more anxiety. So I needed to drink more to be able to cover up that. Um, but the piece of brilliance that I really just wanted to highlight was this idea of when we are in relationship with somebody that is either causing problems in our life or that we're concerned about, it's that leading with love. It's that creating a boundary that we are not blaming, but we're simply saying, I choose to do this other thing. You can come with me or not. Or
Yep.
it's the I see you, I hear you,
Mhm.
and I'm here to listen if there's something that you'd like to talk about. Did I miss anything, or is there anything else that you wanted to share? Because that was a lot.
Well, you did such a beautiful job. I really I can sit here and do this again. You're a lovely host and interviewer. I really enjoyed it today. But mainly, I think I want to say this just in closing. This might wrap it up in a beautiful bow. Um, my son was 2 when my wife came to me and said, you don't have to quit drinking, but you can't stay here. And I know when you're confronted by knowing you need to quit and it's like it feels like you're your only friend. I get it. And what happened was, well, this is a family disease in a negative sense. It takes down families. I'm just so grateful to live the life I have now because my wife was courageous that day. And I'm 16 years sober. My son is off the autism spectrum, completely healthy, and he couldn't speak when he was 5. And he's at the Walter Cronkite School in Arizona State, becoming a play-by-play broadcaster. So, and I'm tighter than ever and hold my wife in the highest regard because she saved my life and changed our family's life. And that's that's what matters. That's what happens when you step into the ring. There's a lot of negativity and stigma associated to it, but when you step in the ring and you start addressing that call for love, um, life on the other side, it's going to be a little work, but life on the other side is really worth it. And I just want to say thank you to you and Laura and what you stand for and who you are and what you're bringing to our industry. Because, one of my passions is leaving dentistry better than I found it. And just being here today with you, I feel like we moved the needle. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so, so much. I'm just beside myself grateful. And thank you to all of you who are listening today. Remember, no one ever regrets not drinking the morning after. Every decision that you make today shapes the smiles of your tomorrow. So keep making choices that brighten your world and the world around you.
Mm.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, dear.